Hey folks, in this video we are going to be discussing how to send emails using Google Apps Script and populating them with dynamic data tables. So the example today is going to collect data from a Google Sheet, and then we are going to learn how to write a 4-file app script that will collect the data from the sheet using a custom function called data collector. Then we will write an HTML email that dynamically references that data. And then we'll learn how to use a CSS file in order to stylize the data table. And the result will be a dynamic script that will result in an email like you just saw there that I didn't clean out. So now you can see it here. We populated this new table into the email itself. And what this is going to allow you to do is if you want to add a new person, a new place, with a new position, you can just rerun your script, and the code is going to expand to now have that new data entry appear in here. This will also apply to the columns, so that if you want to add columns out, it'll dynamically respond to that as well. I would say this lesson is probably on the range of intermediate to advanced. It's pretty straightforward, but where the potential difficulty may arise is if you have no experience with HTML or CSS. If that arises for you, I would say just take your time, stick with it. It can be a bit jarring at first, but it is pretty straightforward. I've had some people reach out to me over the last couple of weeks, which is wonderful. So please feel free to send me an email. You can see it on the screen here. It's also linked up in my bio. And then there are tons of wonderful resources out there to learn HTML and CSS if you're interested in doing so. Cool. So with that out of the way, let's get to our lesson. So you can see I just made a copy of the sheet. My layout is just super basic. I don't think it matters if you have numbers or anything like that. Basically, you just have your spreadsheet with the data that you want to pull into an email. We are going to be referencing the sheet ID, so that will be a data point that you're going to want to reference. When it comes time to enter that in the video, I'll let you know. Feel free to pause it if you need to go back and get it, or you can note it now. So we are going to be using a bounded Google Apps Script, which means that the script is going to be associated with this spreadsheet. You can use an unbounded app script. I've discussed that in some of my other videos. And I will make a note once we get to the point of the script, how you could dynamically reference a spreadsheet. But to get to our bounded script, we are going to go to the extensions menu and then go to app script. You can see that I already have my file open, and I am going to change the name of the project to Dynamic Tables for Email. And I am going to begin by creating my data collector function. So one of the habits that I like to do is to alphabetize my files so that I can more easily find them. So I've started to call my function files function with a colon, and then I am going to reference the name of the function so that I can just kind of scan my scripts and know what it's called. So for my purposes, I like to start clean with nothing there, just to kind of get in the flow of it. You can do whatever you want to, use the boilerplate. But we will begin by typing out the word function, data collector, and this function is going to have one argument, which is the sheet ID. So we will begin by accessing the workbook. So we will declare a variable for WB. My brain says workbook, WB. You can call this variable whatever you want to. It is going to reference spreadsheet app, and then it is going to call the get active spreadsheet. Now, in some of my other videos, I've leveraged the spreadsheet app .open by ID in the event that you are using an unbounded script, meaning it's not associated with a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or a Google Slides presentation. you can use the identification number of the workbook or the document or whatever and open it through this variable. But for these purposes, I didn't want to have to pass a secondary variable in here, and I didn't want a static variable in here. So I'm just kind of dynamically using this as get the active spreadsheet. So anytime that you use this line of code in here, it's just going to pull from whatever spreadsheet is associated with the script. Next, I am going to access all the sheets in the workbook. And we are going to create a variable called sheets, and we are going to call our WB variable. We're going to say get sheets. Now, the reason that we're getting sheets is because I want to loop through the sheets. So I'm going to use for I in sheets. So this is your first video with us, and this is the first time with loops. I stands for iterator. We want to iteratively move through each of the sheets because our next step is going to evaluate the sheet ID. So that's going to be the variable that we pass in here is going to be the identification number of the sheet. And the reason that we're doing that is because Google Apps Script only has a get sheet by name method. And the challenge with get sheet by name is that if you statically enter a name and it changes, the script will no longer function. However, the sheet identification number will never change. So it allows you to reference the identification number in perpetuity, regardless of what the name is. So what we're going to do is establish a conditional to evaluate the sheet IDs. And this is going to be an if statement that is nested within our for loop. So you can see this alignment here is showing that we're inside of our for loop. So we're going to leverage sheets iterator dot get sheet ID. Why is that not showing up? Sheets for I in sheets get sheet ID. Okay, that worked. Equals sheet ID. So basically the double equal sign is how you say it's equal to. Because you can see up here when we are declaring our variables, sheets is equal to, and then some code. This is saying if sheets, oh, that's what it was. If sheets iterator, please make sure that you didn't make the mistake that I did there, which is that I didn't have the word sheets. So it wasn't using the variable, which is why we were not getting that get sheet ID suggestion. So this is saying if sheets iterator dot get sheet ID is equal to the sheet ID that we pass it into, then it is permitted to do a thing. Basically, if it doesn't meet these standards, the for loop just goes right over it. Doesn't even matter. Cool. So now what we are going to do is identify the sheet name. So we're going to declare a variable for sheet name, and we're going to have it set to sheets iterator dot get sheet name. And this is kind of just like a nice little workaround where we are getting the sheet name so that we can pass it to the get sheet by name method without having to actually type out what the name is. So basically the sheet ID is going to dynamically return the name of the sheet that is associated with that ID. Now you'll notice that we have a visual indicator here. These two curly brackets are gray, which means we're within inside our if. When we click to the right and then we go down, you can see we're now in our for loop. And then when we click and go down, you can see we are now back inside of our function. So this could be a part where you get some errors because there's a lot of typing that happens. So please make sure that you have a for loop with two parentheses followed by a curly bracket. And that curly bracket should have a start and an end point. Make sure you have an if statement with a curly bracket, or sorry, with a parentheses. Make sure you have the right sheets name variable in here, that you got the iterator, that you're getting the sheet ID with these two parentheses. Take a moment if you get an error at this point in the code, pause the video, and make sure that you have all of the right characters here, because there is a lot going on and there's the potential, if this is your first time, that you missed a small thing that could be throwing you off. Cool. So now that we have a sheet name variable, we are going to access the sheet. And we are going to declare a variable called datasheet. And that variable is going to reference our workbook variable once again. And then we are going to use the getSheetByName method. And then we are going to pass our sheet name variable that we identified within our for loop. And this is how we are going to access the datasheet with our data entry. Now we are going to access the data range. And we are going to declare a variable. I'm going to call it data range. You can call it whatever you would like. I'm going to reference our datasheet variable, and I'm going to use the getRange method. GetRange allows you to enter up to 4 arguments, and that is going to reference the start row, the start column, the number of rows you want to go, and the number of columns you want to go. So we are going to statically reference the first row. We're going to statically reference the first column, and then we are going to dynamically calculate the last row and the last column. That's what will allow our script to flexibly expand and contrast based upon any new rows that are added or any new columns that are added. So we are going to reference our datasheet variable, line 22. So whatever you called here that you're accessing the sheet, reference that variable once more. You're going to hit a dot and you're going to say get last row. Get last row is a function that is going to count the number of rows within the sheet. So that means that if you have a bunch of blank rows, they are not going to be counted in get last row. Get last row is going to return the numerical value, aka the spreadsheet row number, for the very last row in your workbook that has a character entered into it. So if there's a space, if there's a period, if there's a 1, if there's an A, it will return the number of the row that has that value in it. Finally, we're going to use datasheet.getLastColumn, which has the exact same logic as getLastRow. So if we used logger.log and we ran some code, right now, my script would return the number 5 because 5 is the last row with any values entered into it. So then we're going to do .get display values. So you can see here we have 2 options for get display value and values. Make sure you do values, because if you do value, it will only return 1 result, and if you have multiple results coming in, you might get an error. If you do .get display values, it will return more than 1 value. Now, the one note about this getting display values is that if you have numbers in here and you've stylized those numbers, you probably won't be able to do mathematical calculations with them. This is where AppScript is a little bit challenging because, to my knowledge, it doesn't have any numerical libraries such as pandas in Python that allows you to easily collect data and then do math functions on it. So like sum, division, subtraction, addition, all that type of stuff. Get display values is not going to be the method that you want to use if you have some numbers that you're going to want to like divide by 2 or whatever. It might be fine for those purposes, but if you are getting errors there, you are not going to want to use the get display values method. Next, we are going to construct a return statement. This is basically like when you're using a spreadsheet and you do =2 + 1 and you get 3, that's the return value. So what we want to return here is our data range. So anytime that we use the data collector function, the result of us inputting a sheet ID is going to be the output of the data from that spreadsheet. So we're going to save our function. You can see we now have a data collector function that we could run. Do not run it from this window because the sheet ID argument here is not a valid sheet ID for our script, so you're going to get an error. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to our main file in here, and we are going to start getting some data. So we are going to, we're not going to like use this in our final script, but just for the purposes of like getting access to the sheet and making sure that your code is running, we are going to write a comment here that says data collection. And we are going to declare a variable of, you know what we're going to do actually? We're going to do logger.log. Sorry if this doesn't work. Data collector parentheses, and then we're going to enter our sheet ID. So you can see my sheet ID is 0. If you're operating in sheet 1, it will always be 0. But if you have another sheet in your workbook that you're pulling from, you might have another ID in here. And just so that you can kind of see what I mean, I'm going to create a new sheet so you can see I have sheet 2. You can see the ID number up here is different. So this is, if you're using a sheet that is not sheet 2, you're going to want to copy this value up here. For my purposes, I just want to use sheet 0, so I'm going to go in here, I'm going to put 0, I'm going to hit save, I'm going to run it. Now it's going to ask me to review my permissions. All of this is safe. Basically, you're just allowing the app script to read and write and edit your files. So you're going to go to Advanced, go to your project name, select Allow. Feel free to read this if you want to. It's the script that I'm telling you to write is fine, but you do want to be careful about what you allow access to your information. You can see our result is none. So that is not what I wanted. So let's go back in here and see where we went wrong. So we have our sheet name argument, we have our data range. Aha. So the issue is that I wrote the word var here instead of return. My apologies for that. Got a little ahead of myself. So if you're also getting a null result when you ran that code file, it's because I told you to enter in var instead of return. So if you made that error, apologies, go back and change it. And then when you rerun this file, the result will now be the intended one, which is our data from the sheet that we have. So now that we have successfully established a method for collecting the data from the sheet dynamically, we are going to begin developing our email script. So we're going to start working with the HTML service library and the Gmail app library. And apologies if I'm using the wrong words for that. It could also be methods or functions or whatever. So what we are going to do is let's clear out the code that we just entered in there. And I'm going to start from line 3. And I am going to write out my HTML template connection. So this will connect to HTML template, which we don't currently have yet. We're going to create that in a moment. So we're going to do var HTML is equal to capital H HTML service dot create template from file. And we don't have a file yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we are going to add a file, and it's going to be an HTML file. And I'm just going to call it email. You can call it whatever you want to. This really doesn't matter. If you want to call it like file, HTML, whatever, file might mess it up, but email works fine. So what it'll do, you can see, is that this is how HTML is structured. So we now have a blank HTML file. Now we're going to enter in a string, so we're going to need single quotes or double quotes, and then we're just going to type in the word email because that is the name of our HTML template. So that's our file, my apologies. That is what we are going to create our template for our HTML. And again, you can call this variable whatever you want to. Next, we are going to put our data collection, make data collection available to HTML file. So we are going to reference our HTML variable, and then we are going to call it anything we want to. So I'm going to call it data collect. And sorry, that's like not the best name in the world. You can call it whatever you want to. This is effectively like we're creating an HTML variable. So we're going to reference our data collector function and then enter in our sheet ID. So basically, we're just like the way that we just did logger.log and we did data collector and then we passed in the sheet ID. That's exactly what we're doing here. Instead of naming it to a variable like data, we named it to an HTML variable here. So what's going to happen is like when we want to use this data that we've collected from the sheet in the email, we're going to use this data collect variable in the HTML file so that we can like loop through it and do all that type of stuff. Next, we are going to connect to the template so that we can send it in email. So we are going to declare a variable, and I'm just going to call it email connect, and we're going to reference the HTML variable, and then we are going to evaluate a parentheses, and then we are going to get content and have parentheses. Next, we're going to establish our like sending of the email. So we're going to say send email. We're going to say Gmail app dot send email, and we're going to use a parentheses, and you can kind of see there's like the arguments in here. So this is like how you send an email using the Gmail method. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to hit escape, and I am going to, you know what, I'm going to use square brackets here, and I'm going to use mattbrigidi.dev@gmail.com. Now, when you use square brackets like this, it also allows you to send more than one email. So if you want to send this to more than one person, this is the syntax for doing it. So for example, if I wanted to send this email to my dev account and my personal account, this is how I would do it. But you can also just have it be like one email and it will send it. So we're going to do a comma. I'm going to hit escape, and we're going to do double quotes, and this is going to be the name of our email. So you can call this whatever you want to. I'm going to call it dynamic data tables in email. And then there's like this little, I don't totally understand why this is the case, but basically it's like this little message in the event that the HTML doesn't load, I believe. So I just say, please use Gmail. Email is like a very weird, it's not weird, I apologize. That's not the right word for it. It's a unique method of sending data and information because it's not standardized. At least that's my understanding of it, where it's like Hotmail is different from Gmail, is different from AOL, is different from, you know, Outlook or whatever. So there's no uniform way of how they're structured, I suppose. So when we use this Gmail app to send the email, I believe it's structured to Gmail. Now, if you're watching this and what I just said is incorrect, I apologize. Please say so in the comments so that anyone who's watching this has a deeper understanding of how email works, because I don't. I just know how to do it. So then I'm going to use curly brackets, and I am going to identify the HTML body, and I am going to use the email connect variable. So this is how we get our HTML to go into the send email method. And you can see I've made an error here. That's why there are like these little red lines. This curly bracket needs to be over here. So if you currently have curly bracket HTML capital B body curly bracket, delete that second curly bracket, go to the end of email connect, and use the curly bracket there. And then the last thing that we need to do, you can see we have another red line, is we need to close out our parentheses, I believe. So let's see if this will do it. Nope. That doing it? Nope. We got an extra one down here. Oh, my apologies. That was fine. The issue is that we're missing a comma right here. So you can see that red line goes away and we're good to go. I just want to take a moment to say, like, you've seen that I've made some mistakes in here, and they're from little things, right? They're like missing a comma, or I accidentally typed in var instead of return. These are little things that when you're learning how to do this stuff can make things very disorienting. So if you are getting an error, pause the video, look at your code, scroll back in the video and look at the code that I've written, and ensure that things are lining up the way that they should, that you have things that match up with one another. You can see that there are visual representations within the IDE, this app script file here, that give you indications of how things relate to one another. So you can see when I click next to this parenthesis, I'm getting another parenthesis over here. When I highlight Email Connect, you can see it's highlighting the other instances of Email Connect. When I highlight HTML, you can see we're also getting other instances of HTML. So learning how to debug these environments is a really valuable experience to have. Stay patient with it. It can be really frustrating, but you got this. Cool. So now what we're going to do is save our project, and we're going to go to HTML, our email.html file, and we're going to start writing out our HTML code. So just to ensure that it works, we're going to just send an HTML email. So if you're using the template file, it's probably starting at line 7. I'm going to start at line 7, and I'm going to use a p tag. Now, within HTML, you can see you have an opening tag and a closing tag. The difference between the two is that closing tags have a slash at the end of them. So I'm going to add my closing tag, and you can see it automatically identifies that there's an open p tag, and it suggests a closing p tag. So I'm going to begin by saying, with my salutation, I'm going to say, hello, this is email. And that's it. I'm going to save it, and we're going to go back to our code file. And we are going to run our, I call it my function. You can call it whatever you want to. But what we should have here is we should send a dynamic data tables in email message to MapBridgeD or to yourself. You don't have, I wouldn't recommend sending me your email, but if you want to, hey, go for it. So I'm going to hit run. It is going to ask us to review permissions once again. This one is allowing us to access the Gmail account, right? So it's the same thing as when we allowed Sheets access. This one is just for Gmail. Cool, so we're gonna hit allow. Hopefully the code compiles very quickly. It does. We go in here. You can see I've gotten a security alert. I'm gonna hit refresh. You can see I now have 2 security alerts. I'm gonna delete it. And then you can see, check it out. I got dynamic data tables in email. Hello, this is email. This is wonderful, right? We have now established a way to send email. So in the event that you just want to set up an automated email, all you have to do is use this HTML service variable, this email connect variable, and this method over here. And then if you have an HTML file, then you can just start writing HTML and you're good to go. But for our purposes, we also want to create a data table. So we are going to use our data, or our data collect HTML variable right here. We're going to be using this information to add a table to the email that we just sent. There's going to be some moving parts in here. This part is going to get complicated. So it might be best for you to note the timestamp of the video so that if you do need to go back, you can directly go to this point and begin your process over if you start to have some errors. Okay. So we are going to begin. I'm going to add some space in here. Hopefully it's easier to see. So we're going to begin by using a table tag. And then I'm going to close the table and we're going to hit enter. Now we're going to begin by creating a table head. So we're going to use a T head tag, and we're going to close our T head. Okay. Then we are going to establish a table row. Oops, sorry. We're going to also close our table row. And then we are going to create individual table headers. Okay, so we just did a lot. Let's take a moment to make sure that you have all your tags. You want a table tag, a T head tag, a TR tag, which stands for row, and then a table header, which is TH. And you want to make sure that you have closing tags for all of them. The way that you reference variables in HTML is the following method. You're going to do a less than sign, a question mark, and an equal sign. I like to hit space so that I can clearly see it. And then you are going to reference your data, your variable. My apologies because I forgot mine. I am going to switch back to my code file to check my name. It is data collect. So we're going to reference data collect. And then we are going to reference the points in the table that we want, or in the data array that we want to use. We're going to use another question mark, and then we're going to use a greater than sign. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the method that I just used here, I touch on it in some other videos, so I'm going to do my best to briefly explain it, but I am not going to show a demonstration of it. Effectively, what happens is when we run the data collector and we grab data from a Google Sheet for the data range, we end up getting an array of arrays. So what happens is this is an array, and this is an array, and this is an array, and so forth, right? So what happens is arrays have an index of 0. So in your spreadsheet, you'll see that row 1 is denoted by the number 1. And effectively, column A is represented by the text character of A. But once it ends up in an array, it no longer has that structure. And the result is that instead of starting at 1, it starts at 0. And that's what 0 index means. So when we're working with our table header, we want the header of the table to be these values in here, which within the spreadsheet are row 1, but within the data array, they are index 0. So when we type in data collect index 0, that is referencing the row, like what we believe to be the row and what we believe to be the column. But what the array believes to be index 0, 0.0. So data collect in here is going to return the value of name. When we change it to 0, 1, it will reference place. 0, 2 will reference position. So what you can do is copy this, hit enter, paste it in, and change the second 0 to 1, and the following 0 to 2. So now you will have things that start at the first quote-unquote row, and then dynamically column quote-unquote 1, 2, and 3. And this will now result in a table header of your first row of data. So after our table head closing tag, so you can see we have table row, table head, table. You're going to hit enter twice so that you have a little bit of space in there. Now we have a table head, we also need a table body, and that's where our values are going to go. So we are going to begin with a table body tag. We're going to close our table body. We're going to hit enter. And within there, we are going to enter in our table row. and we're going to have a table row closing tag. And then we are going to reference TD, which I believe stands for table data, but I could be totally wrong about that. My apologies, I am not an HTML expert. And then we're going to close our TD tag in here, and this will allow us to start entering data. Now, we want a dynamic set of data, right? So we want our table to expand and contract based upon the number of values that we have in this sheet. So if this row went away, we want the table to respond. If additional rows are added, we want the table to respond. So we're going to be using a for loop in order to dynamically enter the data into our table data rows, or our TD rows, my apologies. So I want you to click back next to your opening T body tag, and we're going to hit enter. This is a little bit wonky. This is also an area where error has a higher probability of occurring. The first time that I was introduced to this, I struggled with it. So please make note of the timestamp so you can scrub back if you do have an issue. You're going to begin with a less than sign and a question mark. You're going to hit space. You're going to write for. You're going to hit space. You're going to do parentheses. You're going to declare a variable of I, and you're going to equal it to 1. You're going to use a semicolon. You're going to hit space. You're going to do I space less than sign, and then we're going to reference our data collect variable dot length. So this is going to dynamically evaluate the length of the data array, which means the data that is being collected from the sheet is going to be dynamically evaluated to see how many rows are there. We're going to do a semicolon, and we're going to do I++. This stands for iterator plus plus. That means it will add values. If you did minus minus, it would subtract values. So what happens is this for loop is saying that I is equal to 1. The reason that you are having it equal to 1 is because we do not want to include the values in index 0, right? We don't want our header rows to be included in the data table. So instead of starting I at 0, we are going to start it at 1. And then we say if I is less than, meaning this is going to iterate through all of the values in our data collect variable. If it's less than the length, right? So we have, in this sheet in here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So as long as it's under 4, keep iterating, right? That will stop the loop from occurring once it gets to the length that is returned from data collect.length. We're going to click to the right of the parentheses, hit space. We're going to do an opening curly bracket, and we are going to delete the closing portion of it. We're going to hit space. We're going to do a question mark, and then we're going to do a greater than sign. We are going to skip down just a little bit because I want to close this logic out right here. So effectively, we have an open for loop, the same that we had a for loop in our function, right? Data collector function. So we need to make sure that we close this loop because we want our loop to work for our table data rows. So we're going to go to our closing TR tag, and we're going to hit enter. And then we're going to do less than sign, question mark, space. And this is where we're going to add that closing curly bracket in here. And we're going to do space, and we're going to do question mark, and we're going to do a greater than sign. So this right here is the logic to close out this for loop, right? So all of this is connected in the same way that in our function file, we have a for loop with an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. Where I think this got a little bit wonky for me was because of the way that HTML uses these question marks in here. For whatever reason, my mind really struggled with what those things meant. I wish I could explain to you technically what's happening in there. Unfortunately, I don't have a robust understanding of JavaScript. I understand how to use JavaScript to accomplish my goals and my aspirations, but to articulate it to you, I don't have. So if somebody is watching this who does understand these things more deeply, please add them to the comments section so that we can all benefit from it. So now that we have an ability to loop through our data collect variable, we're going to start populating those values into our table rows. So you're going to click back into this TD tag here. So you can see we have an opening TD and then we have a closing TD. We are going to use the less than sign and the question mark, and then we're going to use the equal sign. And then we're going to type out data collect. And we are going to do a square bracket I. So basically this is where it's going to loop, right? So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 through each of the columns. So we're going to mirror the number of columns that we have up here, right? So we're iterating through each row of a single column. So after our iterator here, which is data collect, square bracket I, closing square brackets around a 0, we are going to add our question mark and greater than sign to close out these tags here. Now we can copy these values, or sorry, you know what we're going to do? Yes, we are going to do that. We're going to hit enter, paste 1, enter, paste 2. And what we should now have is the data from our sheet dynamically populating within the table. So we're going to hit save. We're going to go back to our main code file, and we're going to attempt to run this. And what we want to see is a data table where before we just had some HTML with text. I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. I'm going to hit refresh, and you can see I now have dynamic data tables in email, and you can see we're getting that data in here. And you can see we've now successfully pulled in all that information, right? So we have Matt, we have Texas, we have analyst, we have all that stuff, but it doesn't look good, right? It's just like, here's the data, and if we highlight it, you can see it's like structured in a table, but there's no style to it. This is why I believe this lesson is more intermediate to advanced, because it's just much more laborious, right? It's more tedious. There's more steps you have to do. Basically, email doesn't have like when you use HTML, it'll structure it like the framework of a house, right? So underneath like your drywall or whatever, you have, you know, like the skeletal structure of the house. That's effectively what HTML is. It is the skeletal structure of this email. And in order for us to add style elements, we're going to have to use a CSS file, which stands for, I believe, cascading style. So again, I am not an expert in these things. I apologize if I'm saying things that are kind of sort of right. This is what the learning process is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our script file, and we are going to add another file, and it's going to be another HTML file, and we're going to call it CSS. And we're just going to clear out all this stuff because we don't need it. And what we're going to do before we enter in like the style elements of things is we're going to connect our CSS file to our HTML. So basically, like, this file is independent of the CSS file, so you're going to have to write some code to connect the two. So within your HTML file, you can see that you have this opening HTML tag, and then you have this opening header tag, and then there's this thing here that says base target equals top. We're going to click that section of the code here, and we're going to hit enter, and we're going to use a less than sign, question mark, exclamation point, equal sign, and then we're going to use HTML, capital H, lowercase tml, capital S, service, dot create, capital HTML, output, capital F from, capital F, file, and then we're going to reference CSS the same way that we've referenced email. and then we're going to use .get content, empty parentheses, semicolon, question mark, greater than sign. Now, that is a lot of stuff to type from memory. Obviously, I am not doing that. Obviously, I looked up at some point how to do that. That is the whole point of your coding process, right? This is about referencing textbooks. Typically in this case, they are digital textbooks available online. So you can see we're using HTML service, create HTML output from file.get content. Check out what we did in here, right? Very similar thing where we did HTML service.create template from file, right? So these are all built-in functions within or methods within AppScript that are available to you. It's not readily available how or why you would do this if you have no experience doing it. And like I said, I don't have a ton of experience doing it, but I do have a ton of experience getting things done that I want to achieve, and this is how I do it. So let's go to our css.html file now, and we are going to begin by using a style tag. And the same way that we have opening tag, we need a closing tag. So we're going to do \style, and we are going to hit enter. So this stuff largely came from me looking this up online, just Googling like how to do CSS, how to do a CSS table. So this stuff I didn't write from scratch. I referenced other people's code, which helped me learn how to do this stuff. So what I'm about to show you is something that I learned from either a YouTube video or an online post somewhere. I apologize that I don't have the sources for it, but I've been using this template for a really long time, and I just didn't take note of it. But there are a lot of great resources out there, and I'll probably link some of them up in the description or the comments section so that you can view them on your own. But it is really as simple as like just Googling for, or like using ChatGPT now. Always be careful what you put into ChatGPT, but for this type of stuff, it's probably cool. Just say like how to make a cool CSS table in HTML. And some things will be available to you and some things won't be available to you. But that's how I learned how to do what I'm going to show you in here. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to be on line 3. I'm going to type in table, and I am going to have an opening and closing curly bracket. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to type border dash collapse, and then a colon, and I'm going to do a space and do collapse. Then I am going to do border radius 15 pixels, which is what the PX stands for, semicolon. I'm going to do my margin at 25 pixels and 0. I'm going to change my font family to sans serif. I'm going to do box shadow of 0, 0, 20 pixels. And I'm going to use RGBA, and I'm going to use 0, 0, 0, 0.15, semicolon. I'm going to have my width be at 650 pixels. I am going to text align to center, and I am going to have table layout to fixed. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to go back to my code file, and I'm going to run that again just so that we can kind of see what we did. I'm going to hit delete there. I'm going to refresh. I have a new one, and check it out, right? We now have our table stylized in a different way, right? So it's starting to look more like a table here. You can kind of see the lines in between the rows here, right? How we have like margins and spacing and padding and all that type of stuff. So this is like, this is like the art of this, where it's kind of like painting by numbers, you know what I mean? Where you're messing around, you're just kind of sending emails. There's also this website called CodePen that allows you to do CSS and HTML in like a contained environment, so that if you don't want to, keep sending emails and deleting emails and stuff, that's a really good place to learn how to do CSS. But we're going to keep going. I'm sorry that this is kind of like a long-winded video. It's my first time trying to explain this stuff, so if you have any notes, feel free to send them. So I'm going to do T head now and TR. These things basically enable you to like when you write table here, it's going to your HTML file, and it's anything that says table is going to map to that tag that you put in there. So when we typed T head TR, it's basically saying that anything that we enter in there is going to start changing T head and TR tags. So we're going to do a curly bracket, and we're going to say background. Oh, sorry. It's background dash color. And we're going to do hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, semicolon like that. And then we're going to do color, and we're going to do hash, and we're going to do F, 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 F. I think it's 6 of them. And then we're going to do padding, and we're going to do semicolon, and we're going to do 12 pixels and 15 pixels. You're going to hit save, and then I want you to see what's happening in here. So hit refresh. Check it out. That's now added color to our header row. So, I went a little faster, so it might not have been clear. But effectively, what I believe is happening is this background color is being set to black with this hex code. And then the color of the text, I believe, is being set to white. I apologize because I haven't looked at this in a little while, but I think that's what's occurring here. So if you ever want to change colors, all you have to do is number one, you can just Google what the hex code is for the color you want. Or you could literally just go back to your spreadsheet and go in here. And, right now this is impacting the color of the text. And what you can do is you can click on this add custom color option and then check it out. It'll give you the hex code, and then it'll give you your RGB values. So I don't know if you recall, but just take note, right? We have these 6 zeros here. When we go back in here, check it out. You have 6 zeros, right? And that's the background color, which is populating the color in your header row here. Additionally, you can see we have this RGBA up here. That's referencing these numbers right here. So there are 2 different ways that you can tell computers how to change colors. It's with the hex code and the RGB values. And it just kind of depends what the method or the language requires at that time. So if you wanted to change your, the header row to this red, you could just copy this hex code here, go in here, swap it out, paste it in, save it, hit run, and you can see last time it was black. Now we hit it and it's red, right? So that's the way that you can kind of start to play with style here. Again, the most accessible way for me was going in here and changing this stuff. There's tons of resources online that will give you, the values that you need. So next we're going to change the table data a little bit. So or TD, sorry if that's not table data. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to do padding, and we're going to have that set to 12 pixels and 15 pixels. And we're going to do T-body, TR, space, opening, closing curlies. I'm going to hit enter just so that we have some more white space here. Hit it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So then we're going to do border bottom set to 1 pixel, and it's going to be solid, and we're going to add a hex code to it, which is 6 Ds. Okay, and then we are, let's add this thing in here that I have, which is T-body, TR, last of type. And we're going to do a semicolon, and then we're going to do border bottom, and then we're going to have it set to 2 pixels, solid, and then we're going to have our hex code be 0098789. Cool. So I think that's all we have to do right now. Let's hit run, and let's go back and see what we got. Cool. So now you can see we have like some lines in here and we have our colored header row and it just looks cleaner and all that type of stuff. I think that's like a good place to kind of give you an entry point to what's possible in CSS. You know, this one right here in and of itself is an art form, a profession, a full state of knowledge that is independent of a lot of the work that you might be doing if you're like a data analyst or a data visualization professional or anything like that. You know, this lesson is kind of a big one, so I am interested if you found it helpful. I use this a lot to kind of like, you know, send people emails and standardize reports. You know, you can use the trigger function over here to automate it so that your email gets sent every single day. You know, like I said, it does expand and contract. So if we add in some more data and some stuff and then some things and we run it, we're going to get an email with some data, more stuff, and some things. And then in the event that you want to add data and have it be 1, 4, 3, 2, 3, 5, whatever, it doesn't matter. You know, I'm just like typing random stuff. All you have to do is go to your HTML file, copy your header row, change it to a 3, go to your table row, change the 2 to a 3, hit save, hit run, get no errors, refresh your email, check it out. Now you have a whole new data column, you have a whole new row in here. Same thing applies if you start like deleting rows, right? So I'm gonna just go in here and sayonara to myself. I'm gonna hit run one more time. Check it out, we got a fully updated table in here. Yeah, so I hope you found this lesson to be helpful. It was a really fun one for me once I learned how to do this, so I hope it was a fun one for you. Got a bunch of other videos on my channel. Always interested in your feedback. I've started to hear back from people, so that's been really exciting. Please reach out. Please use the comment section, like I said. I know what I think I know, and it's always helpful when I'm corrected by people so that my knowledge continues to bloom. And I hope that that's what this channel is for you. Wish you the best of luck on your journey, and hopefully I'll be hearing from you soon.